The chandelier-lit ballroom shimmered like a crown jewel the night the city's elite gathered for the Aurelian Foundation Gala, a night meant to celebrate generosity but destined to expose pride, prejudice, and a truth no one saw coming. And at the edge of that glow stood Elias Reed, a janitor in a pressed gray uniform, polishing a marble column with the quiet care of a man who understood that dignity didn't require applause, his eyes drifting now and then toward the stage where the orchestra tuned their instruments and toward the grand piano draped in black velvet, because music, real music, had once been his language before life bent him into silence, and as servers floated by with crystal flutes and laughter rang like coins, CEO Victoria Hale cut through the room in a sculpted black gown, her smile precise, her gaze sharper, her reputation legendary for turning companies into empires and people into footnotes, and when her heel paused near Elias and her eyes flicked to his uniform, something cold crossed her face as she made a show of stopping, of lowering her voice just enough to humiliate without screaming, remarking how impressive it was that even the help was allowed to wander so close to donors, her friend smirking as if cruelty were a private joke, and Elias nodded politely, stepping back, because he'd learned the power of not reacting, because his daughter's medicine cost more than pride, because tonight was just another floor to mop, but fate, as it often does, waited patiently for arrogance to speak too loudly, and it did when the orchestra's murmur snapped into panic as the conductor rushed on stage, whispering urgently to the event manager, the pianist who was to perform the centerpiece concerto suddenly ill, fingers locked, ambulance called, donors restless, cameras rolling, and the conductor's voice cracked through the microphone asking if anyone at all, could play, the room buzzing with awkward laughter until silence fell heavy and uncomfortable, and Elias felt his chest tighten because the piano's presence pulled at memories he'd buried under years of night shifts and loss, memories of concert halls in Prague, of competitions, of a left hand that learned to sing when the right was broken, of a career derailed by a factory accident and a daughter born premature on the same day the doctor said, choose, and he didn't move, he couldn't, until a violinist recognized the way Elias was staring, not with curiosity, but with hunger, and whispered something to the conductor, who turned and asked aloud if the janitor would step forward, a ripple of disbelief slicing the air as Victoria laughed once, sharp and dismissive, telling the conductor not to embarrass himself, that this was a gala, not a charity stunt, but the conductor, desperate and dignified, insisted, and Elias walked, each step heavy, each gaze heavier, his uniform a quiet rebellion against the tuxedos, and when he sat at the piano, the bench creaked like it was surprised to be trusted, his fingers hovering, trembling not from fear but from the gravity of return, and then he played, not to impress, not to prove, but to remember who he was before the world decided he was small, and the first notes fell like confession, warm and precise, a river finding its old bed, the orchestra breathing with him, following as if they'd been waiting years for this cue, the room changing, mouths parting, phones lowering, hearts leaning forward, and Victoria's smile fractured, then vanished, as the music grew, carrying sorrow and joy braided tight, carrying the sound of nights Elias had played to lull his daughter to sleep in hospital rooms, carrying the discipline of a virtuoso who never stopped practicing even when no one listened, and when the final chord faded, the silence was holy, then the applause crashed like a wave, donors standing, tears unashamed, the conductor bowing to Elias like an equal, like a master, and Victoria, pale, stepped forward, her voice thinner now, offering an apology shaped like a compliment, but Elias rose, thanked the orchestra, and said gently that respect wasn't something you give after talent proves itself, it's something you give before, because people are more than their uniforms, and the words landed harder than any accusation, the cameras capturing not a fall from grace but a lesson learned too late, and in the days that followed, the video spread, donations doubled, scholarships were named, a conservatory offered Elias a position he declined in favor of teaching nights at a community center where prodigies wore sneakers and janitors could be maestros, and Victoria funded it quietly, perhaps changed, perhaps trying, and if this story moved you, if you believe greatness can hide in plain sight and kindness is the truest power, then subscribe to the channel, because these are the stories that remind us who we can be, and the next one might just change how you see the world.